The Galactic Council's provocation. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with tension, its vast expanse filled with representatives of various star systems. High above, holographic displays showed the latest reports of human expansion, terraformed planets, new colonies, and technological marvels that rivaled those of the oldest and most established civilizations. At the center of the room, Emperor Belos, leader of the Vakari Dominion, stood with a sneer on his reptilian face, his words dripping with disdain. "These humans," Belos spat, "they think they can reshape the galaxy to their whims, ignoring our laws, our traditions. They must be stopped before their arrogance spreads any further." Frank Jackson, the human ambassador, sat calmly, though the fury simmering beneath his composed exterior was palpable. He knew this moment was inevitable, the day when humanity's rapid rise would provoke the ire of those who had long held power. Yet he had not anticipated the sheer hatred that now radiated from the council members. "Humanity seeks only to carve its own path among the stars," Frank replied, his voice steady. "We have no desire to bow to the whims of those who would see us enslaved or eradicated. We claim the right to forge our destiny." A roar of anger erupted from the council members, their voices melding into a chaotic cacophony of accusations and threats. The Emperor's eyes gleamed with malevolent satisfaction as he raised a hand to silence the assembly. "Then you leave us no choice," Belos declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The council hereby decrees that humanity must be subjugated by force. Your colonies will be destroyed, your people scattered, and your very existence erased from the annals of history." Frank felt his blood run cold as the Emperor's words sank in. He thought of the countless human settlers struggling to eke out a living on distant worlds, of the immense sacrifices and ingenuity that had allowed humanity to reach the stars. All of it was now at risk. Suddenly, alarms blared across the chamber. An aide rushed to Belos, whispering urgently in his ear. The Emperor's face twisted into a vicious smile as he turned back to Frank. "A Vakari warship has just wiped out a human colony," Belos said, his voice laced with dark triumph. "Thousands dead? Let this be a warning, Ambassador. Surrender now, or your species will burn." Frank's heart pounded in his chest. War had begun, and humanity was unprepared. As he raced back to his shuttle, one thought drowned out all others. There was only one way to protect humanity now. Earth's ancient warship, hidden for millennia beneath the surface, had to be activated. It was their last hope, awakening the Defiant. The atmosphere on Earth was tense as Frank Jackson's shuttle touched down in the heart of the military complex. The news of the Vakari attack had spread like wildfire, and Earth's leaders were already convening emergency meetings to discuss their response. Frank wasted no time as he made his way to the war room, his mind racing with the enormity of the task ahead. The room fell silent as Frank entered, all eyes turning to him. General Hawthorne, a veteran of countless battles, stepped forward, his expression grim. "Ambassador Jackson," Hawthorne said, his voice steady, "we've received your reports. Are you certain that activating the Defiant is our only option?" Frank met the general's gaze, his resolve unshakable. "It's our last hope, General. The Defiant is the most advanced warship humanity has ever created. If anything can stand against the might of the Galactic Council, it's that ship." Hawthorne nodded slowly, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. "Very well, we'll proceed with the activation. But you understand what this means, don't you? The Defiant was designed as a last resort. If we use it, there's no turning back." "I'm aware, General," Frank replied, his voice tinged with sadness. "But we have no choice. The Council has made it clear they won't stop until we're destroyed." Within hours, the order was given. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, in a vast subterranean vault, the Defiant began to stir. The ship was a marvel of ancient human engineering, a relic of a time when humanity had wielded power that rivaled the gods. Its hull was composed of a metal alloy stronger than anything known in the galaxy, and its weapons systems were powered by a core of pure energy harvested from the very fabric of space-time. As the ship powered up, its systems came online one by one, illuminating the dark chamber with a brilliant blue light. The hum of the engines grew louder, resonating through the Earth as the Defiant prepared to ascend for the first time in millennia. Frank and a hand-picked crew boarded the ship, their faces a mix of awe and determination. They knew the stakes. They were about to embark on a mission that would determine the fate of their entire species. The Defiant rose from its subterranean vault, breaking through the Earth's crust with a thunderous roar. As it ascended into the sky, its powerful shields shimmered, deflecting the debris that rained down from the massive explosion. The ship was a behemoth, dwarfing the skyscrapers of the cities below as it soared into orbit. For a moment, there was a stunned silence across the galaxy as news of the Defiant's awakening spread. The Galactic Council had never seen anything like it, an ancient warship, armed with technology far beyond their comprehension, piloted by a crew determined to protect their home at any cost. But the Vakari were not deterred. Even as the Defiant reached orbit, they began to mobilize their forces, preparing to meet the human threat head-on. The stage was set for a battle that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy. The first battle. The Defiant's sensors buzzed with activity as the ship approached the edge of the solar system. Ahead, a vast Vakari battle fleet awaited them, led by the infamous warlord Zavak. The Vakari were a ruthless species, their ships bristling with weapons, and their warriors trained in the art of war from birth. They had already decimated several human colonies, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Frank Jackson stood on the bridge of the Defiant, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Vakari fleet was massive, outnumbering the Defiant 10-1. But Frank knew that numbers alone wouldn't decide this battle. The Defiant was humanity's trump card, a ship unlike any other in the galaxy. "Commander, we're approaching the enemy fleet," the tactical officer reported, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "They're holding formation, but their weapons are powering up." "Activate the shields," Frank ordered, his voice calm. "Prepare to engage." The Defiant's shields shimmered to life, a protective barrier that enveloped the ship in a glowing blue aura. The Vakari, seeing the human ship's approach, opened fire. Beams of searing energy and volleys of plasma torpedoes streaked through the void, aimed directly at the Defiant. The ship rocked under the impact, but the shields held, deflecting the enemy fire like raindrops against a window. Frank watched as the tactical display showed the Vakari ships closing in, their weapons blazing with deadly intent. "Target their flagship," Frank commanded. "Hit them with the EMP cannon." The Defiant's weapon systems whirred to life, and a crackling burst of energy erupted from the ship's main cannon. The EMP blast surged through space, striking the Vakari flagship and several of its escorts. The effect was immediate. Their systems fried, engines sputtered out, and weapons fell silent. The once imposing warships drifted aimlessly, powerless in the face of the Defiant's might. "Follow up with a missile barrage," Frank ordered, seizing the opportunity. "Take them out while they're vulnerable." A volley of missiles launched from the Defiant's silos, streaking toward the helpless Vakari ships. One by one, the enemy vessels were obliterated in fiery explosions, their debris scattering across the void. The tide of battle had turned, and the Vakari, realizing their mistake, began to retreat. But the Defiant was relentless. Frank ordered the ship to pursue, cutting down the fleeing ships with precision strikes. By the time the battle was over, the Vakari fleet was in ruins, and the Defiant stood victorious. Rallying, the galaxy news of the Defiant's stunning victory spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The Galactic Council, once so confident in their superiority, now found themselves on the defensive. The Vakari, who had long terrorized the galaxy, were shaken by the defeat, and their allies began to waver. Earth's leaders, emboldened by the success of the Defiant, dispatched envoys to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, seeking out potential allies among the oppressed and downtrodden races. Many had suffered under Vakari rule for generations, their cultures suppressed, their worlds plundered. Now, with the Defiant leading the charge, they saw a chance to throw off their chains and fight for their freedom. Frank Jackson, now a fleet commander, found himself at the center of these efforts. He met with leaders of various star systems, forging alliances and coordinating military campaigns. The Defiant became a symbol of hope, a beacon that rallied the oppressed to the cause. As the galaxy's political landscape shifted, the Galactic Council found itself increasingly isolated. Their once unchallenged authority was crumbling, and rebellions began to erupt on Council-controlled worlds. The Vakari, desperate to regain control, launched a series of brutal crackdowns, but these only served to fuel the fires of resistance. Back on Earth, human engineers worked tirelessly to unlock more of the Defiant's secrets. The ship was a treasure trove of advanced technology, much of it still unexplored. Every new discovery made the Defiant even more powerful, further tipping the scales in humanity's favor. But the victory came at a cost. The Council, recognizing the threat that the Defiant posed, began to mobilize their forces on an unprecedented scale. Entire fleets were being assembled, their ships bristling with the latest weapons and defenses. The stage was set for a final, cataclysmic confrontation. The final stand-As, the Defiant, led daring attacks against Council supply lines and shipyards. Rumors began to circulate of a terrifying new weapon being developed by the Vakari. The Planet Killer, as it was called, was said to be capable of annihilating entire worlds with a single strike. If completed, it would give the Council the means to wipe out humanity once and for all. Frank Jackson knew that the Defiant had to strike first. The ship's advanced sensors had detected increased activity in a remote sector of space, far from the front lines. It was there, hidden away from prying eyes, that the Vakari were constructing their superweapon. The Defiant set a course for the sector, its crew steeling themselves for the battle ahead. As they approached the coordinates, the ship's sensors picked up a massive structure in the distance, a sprawling space station, bristling with weapons and surrounded by a protective fleet. "Looks like we've found it," Frank muttered, his eyes narrowing as he studied the tactical display. "Prepare to engage. This is it, people, our last chance to stop them." The Defiant's engines roared to life as the ship closed in on the station. The Vakari fleet, alerted to their presence, moved to intercept, their weapons blazing. The Defiant's shields flared as they absorbed the incoming fire, but this time the enemy was prepared. The Vakari had learned from their previous defeat, and their ships were equipped with new, more powerful weapons. The battle that followed was brutal. The Defiant's advanced weapon systems tore through the enemy ranks, but the Vakari fought back with a ferocity born of desperation. Explosions rocked the ship as it took hit after hit, its shields flickering under the onslaught. Frank barked orders, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. The Defiant's crew worked with mechanical precision, launching counterattacks and maneuvering the ship through the hail of enemy fire. But the odds were stacked against them, and Frank knew that they couldn't hold out forever. "Target the Planet Killer," Frank ordered, his voice cold with resolve. "We take that out, and the rest will follow." The Defiant's weapons locked onto the massive station, focusing all their firepower on its central core. A barrage of missiles and energy blasts erupted from the ship, striking the station with unrelenting force. The structure groaned under the impact, its outer defenses crumbling. But just as victory seemed within reach, a warning blared across the bridge. The station was preparing to fire. Frank's blood ran cold as he realized what was happening. The Planet Killer was powering up, and they were the target. "All hands, brace for impact!" Frank shouted, gripping the console as the Defiant's shields flared to maximum power. A beam of unimaginable energy lanced from the station, striking the Defiant head-on. The ship shuddered violently, its hull buckling under the strain. Lights flickered and systems failed as the beam tore through the shields, searing into the ship's core. For a moment, it seemed as though all was lost. But then, with a deafening roar, the Defiant's weapons unleashed one final devastating volley. The station's core erupted in a blinding explosion, consuming the entire structure in a fireball of energy. The shockwaves slammed into the Defiant, sending it spinning through space. The crew held on for dear life as the ship careened out of control, the stars a blur outside the viewports. The aftermath. When the Defiant finally stabilized, the crew found themselves drifting in the wreckage of the Vakari fleet. The battle was over, but the ship was in ruins. Hull breaches had exposed several decks to the vacuum of space, and the once gleaming interior was now a twisted, charred mess. Frank Jackson slumped in his chair, exhaustion weighing heavily on his shoulders. They had won, but at a terrible cost. The defiant, humanity's last hope, was barely holding together. And yet they had stopped the planet killer, saved countless lives, and dealt a crippling blow to the Vakari. "Status report," Frank called out, his voice hoarse. "Shields are down. Weapons offline," the tactical officer replied. "We've taken heavy damage, but the core is stable for now." Frank nodded, relief flooding through him. They had survived. But even as he allowed himself a moment of rest, he knew that the war was far from over. The Council would not give up so easily, and the galaxy was still teetering on the brink of destruction. "Send a message to Earth," Frank ordered. "Let them know that the planet killer has been destroyed. And prepare for repairs. We're not done yet." The crew set to work, patching up the ship as best they could. But the damage was severe, and it was clear that the Defiant would need extensive repairs before it could return to the fight. As the engineers worked, Frank found himself gazing out at the stars, his mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. They had won a great victory, but the war was far from over. The Galactic Council was still out there, their forces scattered but not defeated. And somewhere in the galaxy, new threats were undoubtedly emerging. Frank knew that humanity's survival depended on their ability to adapt, to outthink and outfight their enemies. The Defiant was a symbol of that resilience, a testament to the indomitable spirit that had brought them this far. But even as they prepared for the next battle, Frank couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something bigger and more dangerous than anything they had faced before. The galaxy was a vast and mysterious place, full of unknown dangers and unimaginable power. And as long as the Defiant still flew, humanity would be ready to face whatever came next. The final confrontation as the Defiant limped back to Earth for repairs, Frank Jackson received a message that chilled him to the bone. A mysterious signal had been detected, emanating from the far reaches of the galaxy, an ancient, forgotten sector known only as the Dark Nebula. The signal was powerful, and it carried a message in a language that no one had heard in millennia. "The Zarek," the message said. "We are awakening." Frank's blood ran cold as he read the translation. The Zarek were a race of beings that had once ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, their technology so advanced that they were considered gods by lesser species. They had disappeared eons ago, leaving behind only ruins and legends. But now, it seemed, they were returning. Frank knew that this was the threat he had sensed, the darkness that loomed on the horizon. If the Zarek were truly awakening, then the entire galaxy was in danger. Not just humanity, but every species, every world. "We need to go after them," Frank said, his voice resolute. "We can't wait for them to come to us. If we want to survive, we need to strike first." Earth's leaders were hesitant. The Defiant was barely holding together, and the prospect of facing an enemy as powerful as the Zarek was terrifying. But Frank was insistent. They had no choice. If the Zarek were allowed to regain their full strength, nothing in the galaxy could stop them. After days of debate, the order was given. The Defiant was refitted with the best technology Earth had to offer, its hull reinforced, and its weapons upgraded. A fleet of the best ships from humanity and its allies was assembled, ready to follow the Defiant into the unknown. As the fleet set out for the Dark Nebula, Frank couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over him. The Zarek were unlike any enemy they had faced before, and he knew that this battle would be the ultimate test of humanity's strength and resilience. When they arrived at the coordinates, the sight that greeted them was unlike anything they had ever seen. The Dark Nebula was a swirling mass of black and purple, its depths filled with ancient, twisted structures that defied comprehension. And at its center, a massive ship loomed, its design so alien that it seemed to defy the laws of physics. "The Zarek Dreadnought," Frank whispered, his eyes wide with awe and fear. "This is it." The Zarek ship began to move, its engines glowing with a dark, otherworldly light. As it approached, the fleet prepared for battle, their weapons trained on the massive vessel. The Zarek struck first, Beams of energy lanced out from the dreadnought, slicing through the fleet with terrifying precision. Ships exploded in balls of fire, their crews incinerated in an instant, but the Defiant was ready. Frank ordered the ship to engage, and the battle was on. The Defiant's weapons blazed as it traded fire with the Zarek ship. The dreadnought's shields were powerful, but the Defiant's upgraded weapons began to break through. As the battle raged on, the Defiant's crew fought with everything they had, knowing that this was their last stand. The Zarek ship was relentless, its weapons tearing through the fleet like a scythe through wheat. But the Defiant pressed on, refusing to back down. With each passing moment, the ship drew closer to the dreadnought, its weapons tearing into the alien vessel's hull. Finally, with a deafening explosion, the Zarek dreadnought's core was breached. The ship shuddered as its systems failed, and with a final cataclysmic blast, it exploded, taking the dark nebula with it. The Defiant was thrown clear by the shockwave, its hull battered and scorched. But they had done it. The Zarek were defeated, their threat to the galaxy eliminated. As the survivors of the battle regrouped, Frank Jackson stood on the bridge of the Defiant, staring out at the debris field that had once been the Zarek dreadnought. They had won, but the cost had been high. Countless lives had been lost, and the galaxy would never be the same.